You know about them. You've seen them, but are you one? I am talking about the one and only Karen. That's right, people. We are talking all things Karen today, but specifically, we're talking about the Karens out there. Yes, the epidemic, the pandemic, like COVID is shaking because it is getting overshadowed by the Karens, okay? But specifically through the lens of race. So I am here today with director Patty Ivins. She's going to talk about her documentary, Deconstructing Karen. This film, let me tell you a little bit, okay? It was executive produced by Anna Paquin. You know Anna from True Blood, okay? It's getting all sorts of recognition from film festival organizations and a little bit of a premise. It's basically a bunch of white women sitting down at a dinner party like they have never had, okay? It is hosted by a Black woman and a brown woman to have a radically honest conversation about race and to call out that elephant in the room. So, Patty, welcome to Cancel Me, Baby. I mean, race talk on a Monday morning. And it's a good thing that this is such a simple topic because, you know, we only have 10 minutes and, you know, it's like we're going to have all our bases covered, right?
Yes. Thanks for having me, Taylor. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So given that my show is called Cancel Me, Baby, the whole idea, I have voices from all walks of life, from all sides. And the idea is like, I'm going to put my art out there, my opinion. And if you don't like it, to hell with you. So Patty, have you gotten any sort of backlash from this film before we kind of get into the themes and the nitty-gritty?
We've gotten, listen, I personally haven't gotten, not that this is an invitation, but I haven't gotten the level that Cyber and Regina get weekly. Like their inbox, like they have hired a person just to look at it because they get so much awful in emails and DMs. I find Twitter to be a really complicated place. So I spend more time on Instagram. I feel like Instagram is more my people. Right.
Twitter is the worst. Yes. Like, I thought high school bullies were bad and Twitter just really makes them seem like a walk in the park. So
I think Twitter's just become, for me, it's like high intellectuals and then 4chan. It's like both. It's like, that's it. And like nobody in the middle. So I just don't spend a lot of time there.
So let's talk about, you know, calling things as they are, as we see it, which this film does. Something I appreciate about it is this film comes from a very left-leaning, I feel liberal point of view, but it's self-aware enough to talk about how white liberal women are actually in this arena like the worst, because on the surface, it's like we're the saviors. However, number one, they're actually not doing much and benefiting from the privileges that they have the most, right? So talk to me about how this was maybe eye-opening to you, what you learned, and if you yourself, I don't know where you lean, but if you had any like aha self-awareness moments in this process, like, oh shit.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think my biggest aha moment is literally we're all the same. So we think if we're Democrat, we think if we're liberal, if we think we're independent, if we think we're Republican, it literally doesn't matter. When it comes to race, we're all messing it up every single day. And I think that's the biggest aha moment. And these opportunities to have these labels in our comfort communities that we can tuck ourselves into and feel like we're seen in our ideologies, cool. When it comes to race, we are all messing it up. And that for me was the biggest aha moment. And I think the thing is, yes, maybe it seems like it's a left-leaning POV, but it's an authentic portrayal of two women who are doing work that is more embraced by people on the left. So I think that also could be partly what you're picking up. And it's critical of people who are like, don't teach my 5-year-old critical race theory, which is totally political propaganda. No one's teaching your 5-year-old critical race theory.
So I'm curious for your thoughts on this, Patty. I don't know if you follow Bari Weiss at all. She is an esteemed journalist. She used to be the op-ed editor over at the New York Times. And she went off to branch off and do her own Substack, and it's super successful. It's called Common Sense. And something that she argues is, and she argues against CRT because she says, what happens when, if we're teaching, right, like little white boys and girls that they're better, or even like little boys that they're better than girls? Like, what happens when the backlash comes and then they're grown adults acting this way? And that's why I'm oversimplifying it. Obviously, again, this is a wildly complex topic, but I could honestly see something like that and the validity in something like that. So your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I'd love to have a deeper conversation when I could actually really look at her work, but that premise sounds awful to me. And I don't think anything about, not that I want to make this conversation about CRT,
Right,
but
of course.
CRT isn't about making white kids or white people feel bad. It's about an honest portrayal of our history and the long-term ramifications of living in that history. And so everyone's fragility around their fear that little white kids are going to feel bad learning the truth is like so bizarre to me. It's such a strange, of all the things you could take away from a full, honest education of our actual history, the fact that people are more worried about little white kids feeling bad about it is like the least intellectual conversation around it.
I'm curious, something that this film also points out is how white women and white people are so desperate to be like, I'm woke and I'm not a racist, I swear, and prove it. Now, at the surface, I could see how someone looking at this film, right, directed by you, a white woman, could automatically be like, okay, is this a white woman trying to prove, right, that very thing, versus you being like, no, right? Have you had that sort of internal dialogue? Have you thought that to yourself?
I have to say, like, I just don't care. Like, I literally don't care. I just don't care. I don't care. Like, I personally, myself, Patty Ivins, I have nothing to prove to anyone. So like what people think of like my desire for people to like me or not like me, I literally had to like put that down like several years ago. And this movie is really not about me. It's about this honest, authentic work of these two women of color who are so fed up with the way things are going for their own kids and grandkids that they're willing to sit down with white women one at a time to try to help them see and give them a conversation and words and tools, how racism is present in their daily lives. And really, that's really what the movie's about.
You know, something, I don't know if you experienced this at all in this process. I was on a roundtable panel recently, and it's fascinating because there's even conflict about this within the Black community. I was on a panel with two really successful young Black performers, thought leaders. One is a man, a radio podcast host. One is a woman, like a billboard artist. And they totally didn't see eye to eye. She is like, I don't want to live in a victim mentality. I have more opportunity than my parents, my grandparents. And he was very much like, you know, we have to look at the injustices, and Black people are marginalized all the time. And it was so fascinating and important, I think, and eye-opening to see how this even has to go on within. Here we are, two white women talking about this, right? But how this conflict and dialogue even goes on within that community, right?
I mean, listen, I think Syra and Regina on no level are claiming to speak for all people of color. Like, this is their point of view. This is what they bring into the world. A lot of people won't agree with them, and they're also okay with that. I'll say, as two white women sitting here having this conversation, why this matters, why it matters that you and I are having this, is because in our lives, we as white women really don't talk about this with our friends. We actually just don't have the language, the skills, the experience. So partly what our job is to talk to our white friends, our moms, our, racist uncles, all the things, to not make it a safe space anymore for other people's racism.
And it always happens behind the shadows. And I think I said this on that panel, I think a big part of it, Patty, is the fact that, it can have a combative nature. Even in this film, it was so interesting to see the white women get bent out of shape or say something like, we're not all bad, or I'm upset. And these two women are like, you just erase everything that we just said. And that in and of itself is white supremacy, right? And then you have these buzzwords like white supremacy that turn people off or make people, it's so complicated. So how in your mind is, the best way to have these conversations without people getting shut off, even if it is behind closed doors, like you're saying?
Listen, you just have to not care if someone's going to get turned off. Like, here's
on
the
both
thing.
sides, right, Patty?
Right.
Like,
well, yeah. I mean, the thing is this is not for our white comfort. This conversation is not about making your mom or your friend or your boss or your uncle comfortable. It's about having the courage to say, I don't really know what to say here, but I'm going to tell you, I'm super uncomfortable with what you just said, Uncle Bob, or, friend Betty, I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but that feels really racist. Right. So I think,
or Becky,
Becky, Karen, Betty, Patty, it doesn't literally
right.
We have to start being disruptors. And I think what Siren model really beautifully in the movie and in their work in everyday life is they disrupt our complacency. Really, let's be real. Racism isn't hurting me today. Like, I'm in my life doing my thing. It is hurting me and my family, though, in a more macro sense. It's tearing our communities apart. It's permeating every corner of our society. So you can maybe blindly get through your day as a white woman and be like, la la, it's not really affecting me. It actually really is. So we have to start having these conversations.
Right.
We just do.
I have to start wrapping, Patty, get, our 10-minute race talk unmatched. But, and a line in the movie that highlights what you just said is where one of the women go to the white women, like, would you rather be a Black woman, right? Like, as a white woman, you're like, oh shit, like that hits a certain way. Now, on the whole, you talk about how it's tearing us apart. My issue, but we're going to end on a good note. My issue is even like, if how
you need 2 more minutes, we can take 2 more minutes. It's fine.
Okay, awesome. I was going to say two more.
Yeah, that's fine.
Patty for the win. Director calling the shots. I love it. My issue on the whole is how, again, it is so politicized. I often feel like, the left will sometimes over sensationalize things or dramatize or often
like what? Like how? Give me a real example.
Okay, so here's a real example. So this is going to take a second, but I was going to call out the right side as well, and how they act like, what do you mean? There's nothing going on. Like, what do you talk? We're all the same and woohoo, equal opportunity, right? Yeah. So an example is with, I read a story about a man who studied the numbers and statistics for rooters, very much in the weeds of numbers and all this. Okay. And he was looking at police brutality and how, if you're reading the headlines, it would seem, I'm not acting like it doesn't exist whatsoever, because it absolutely does. But if you look at the headlines in the media, you would think that it's very unproportional, that this is happening all the time and all this. Now, would I want to be a Black person driving in a car for a white person? Hell no, right? Because of this very thing. However, he found that unarmed white people are actually killed at a much higher rate than unarmed Black people. And obviously you would be like, well, of course, there's more white people than Black people. Not that it's okay, but that would make sense. But he found in the numbers, basically it was disproportionate, that idea. But if you look at the media, it would seem like the reverse. So when he brought his findings to Reuters, he was completely ostracized, given death threats, blacklisted from the company, basically fired without warning. The leaders wouldn't have, anything like that kind of thing, right?
I feel like this is a lot of hearsay. I think what I don't love about this conversation is similar to Barry Weiss. Like, I don't have the facts to really respond appropriately, but I'll tell you the circumstantial story that you're painting is too important to actually have a serious conversation without actual facts.
It's
because
too complex. Exactly.
Well, but I want to say to you, like, it's problematic because this is why media gets so distorted. People and I really will say it's been bad my whole life, but it really got bad with Trump, where people take one piece of one bit of research, they exploit it in the wrong way, and then And suddenly that's the catchphrase. And I don't really want to participate in that. And you shouldn't, because you're awesome. You're your own show and we don't need his research. That we even substantiate or fact check ourselves.
Well, that's 100% true. It's like one thing, one headline, and this goes for both sides on all sides will be, like I said, over dramatized, right? That was just an example off the top of my head, but to bridge it together in the end, Patty, we have had this issue. We're here for your movie, pop culture. That's my background, your background. And I feel like it has been so poignant, you know, in so many films, right? Get Out, or even like White Chicks, right? To like make fun of how entitled white girls are. Yeah. Talk to me about some of your favorite examples of this that have really entertained us, but made a point.
I mean, first of all, I love both those movies that you just said.
Iconic.
But I'm going to tell you, like, I don't know. There were some really interesting 70s. There were 70s sitcoms made by Norman Lear and some other really impressive filmmakers of that day that brought Black people into our homes in a more interesting way that you didn't really see through the 80s and the 90s as much. And so I don't really have an easy answer for you. I think Get Out was a really powerful movie and did an incredible job of bringing this conversation to light in a really compelling, scripted way. But I can't think of, you know, for me, it was really important to make this movie that people could engage with and feel like they're sitting at the table. It's not a talking head movie. It's not a, I'm here to lecture you and tell you. It's actually a movie where you get to be a part of the experience. And when I talk to people and they're like, I'm offended by this or da-da-da, I'm like, awesome. You had a seat at the table. Then you actually were there. You stopped sitting in your comfortable couch at home and you started having these conversations like, what would I say? Ooh, my mom has said that. Ooh, my friend has said that. You are in it. And that is the best compliment I can get.
And you guys making fun of things too, in a way, which, I mean, you talk about Norman Lear, like the satire of All in the Family, right? Like those ways of really getting to our core, and being like, oh, like having those light bulb moments. So maybe there will be a Deconstructing Becky or a part 2. Yeah. We'll see, Patty.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Super fun to meet you.
Thank you for your time. Likewise. Appreciate it.
All right. I'm going to follow you